So with the nagging of my fiancé, I've decided to post this story here. It's probably one of the scariest things that's happened to me during my 40 years on this planet. So, I live with my fiancé and my youngest brother who works in law enforcement. This will be semi-relevant to the story. And we live in a smallish town outside of Las Vegas. We don't have much crime for being close to Vegas, but we do have some. And we have no shortage of tweakers and a growing population of homeless folk. Anyway, last summer, I was in between jobs and spent a good deal of time at the public library for my father's business office using the free Wi-Fi to browse jobs. It was around 4 in the afternoon when I returned home, and we have a dog named Suki, and she's a bull terrier, cattle-dog mix. She's wary of strangers and a literal terrorist shit, so it makes her the perfect watchdog. Anyway, it's hot as hell where I live in Satan's butthole, and I'm sweating profusely, so I run a tepid bath and turn on Spotify and grab a magazine and lock myself in the bathroom. The doggo is outside the bathroom door whining because the big idiot hates water but likes dropping her toys in the water. Anyway, I'm mid-bath and I hear my dog losing her shit, and then I heard her run upstairs and I hear someone go, "Oh shit," and I freeze. I'm naked as a jaybird. I have no weapons, and my brother's lockbox with his Glock is upstairs, and my dog is upstairs, fighting off some sort of intruder. I grab my phone as I hear the intruder yelling at my dog, who is, I'm sure, tearing into him. I dial 911 and scream I'm calling the cops. I cue him cursing, and I'm trying to pry 55 pounds of crazy fucking dog off of him. Somehow, he gets away and runs out the back door. My dog tears after him, and as I talk to the dispatcher, I throw on some clothes and then run up the stairs. My dog comes back inside prouder than shit, just strutting around, and I lock her in my brother's bedroom as the cops have shown up and I don't need her biting one of them. Apparently, my neighbour heard the barking too and caught the guy. He's 125 pounds soaking wet, no shirt and covered in dog bites and meth scars. And apparently, he found our fake rock and just let himself inside. He was taken off and the cops told me not to use a fake rock. Well, no shit, I figured that one out at least. The doggo was fed a delicious steak and I spent the next few weeks terrified some tweaker was going to break in again. And now, we keep 2 guns locked up, one upstairs and one downstairs. So this all literally just happened within the past hour. I got out of work at 6:30 p.m. and went to the McDonald's to get a nice coffee. I pulled up to the drive-thru and there's a red truck in front of me with a cap on the bed. It's super wide, so I can't see their mirrors and thus can't get a glimpse of who is inside. I'm minding my own business, listening to Unsolved Mysteries on YouTube when I see that the red truck has pulled up to the second pickup window. You know, there's the window where you pay and then 2 separate windows where you pick up your food. I didn't think anything of it at first and just assumed they had a big order and the McDonald's employee asked them to pull up so I could get my iced coffee. I look up and see the truck's reverse lights come on. Okay, they must have pulled up a little too far and are backing up a little. No big deal, right? They keep backing up without signaling to me at all that they're backing up and I slowly back up too. Luckily, no one is behind me, and they keep backing up until they're finally parked at the first pickup window now. The McDonald's employee just looks out the window at me and shrugs and gives me a look like, I don't know why they did that. A few minutes go by, and at this point, I'm just thinking about how strange and not part of common etiquette it was to back up without signaling to anyone that you need to do so. I mean, they could have easily hit me had I not been looking straight ahead. Curious as to what they were doing. Now, 5 minutes at least goes by and no one is being given any food. I just wanted my iced coffee, so I'm kind of annoyed that they backed up like this, thinking that maybe they were told to go to the second window since I only needed coffee, but they suddenly felt like refusing to do so would get McDonald's to get them their food faster, and thus they backed up to the first pickup window. I don't know, I was just speculating. Anyways, I continue to sit there and wait for my food when I see the passenger door to the truck open. and out comes an older man, like 65, 70 years old probably. He was wearing light khaki-coloured overalls and a dirty white t-shirt. He starts walking slowly over to my car, and I'm thinking maybe he's going to apologise to me for not signalling that they needed to back up or something. He gets to my passenger door window, turns so that he's facing the window head on, and just kind of stares at me. I'm waiting for him to signal to put my window down, thinking that he had something to say. But he just doesn't do anything. He just stands there and stares at me. He starts to lift his hand towards the door handle, and I quickly lock the door. He scowls and walks back to the truck and gets back in the passenger side. And they immediately drive away the second he closes the door. They didn't even get any food. They didn't get anything. They just left. I pull up to the drive-thru to finally get my iced coffee. It's been well over 10 minutes at this point, and I head home. At this point, I obviously have more questions than answers. I mean, why did they back up without signalling? Why did they need to back up at all? Why did he get out of his truck, and why was he about to open my door? Why didn't he say anything? Why didn't they get their food or drinks? It might not be the creepiest story that's ever appeared on this channel, but the whole ordeal just made me really anxious, and I was kind of shaking the whole ride home. Honestly, I just wish I had some insight or understanding as to exactly what happened here. All I know is that the whole thing just felt ominous. I just moved into a new house over the weekend and just paid the first month's rent. I signed a year lease, and the house itself is okay for being built in the 30s. Lots of work to be done, weird layout, unfinished porch, and okay, well, it's a shitty house, but I had to take what I could get. When I saw the house posted on Craigslist, I immediately called the number listed and asked if I could view it in a day or another day during the week. Right off the bat, the dude gives me a bad vibe. Not really creepy yet, but definitely annoying. We arranged to meet that Saturday so that he could show me the inside of the house, and he texted me every day, multiple times, to make sure you're absolutely certain you want to view the house, because I don't want my time wasted. I assure him several times that I literally live 5 minutes away anyway, and I'll be there on Saturday, no question. I should mention I found the house for me and my elderly father, who is in a wheelchair, to move into. The landlord was out in the yard waiting with a huge smile on his face, and I waved hello and then went around to the passenger side door to help my father out of the car and into his chair. And at that point, the landlord's face immediately changes to a scowl. As we approach him, my dad holds his hand out for a handshake when he just looks at me and says, "I thought it was just you," while completely ignoring my dad. I awkwardly try to explain that I didn't think to mention it since he didn't ask. So he goes ahead and ends up showing us the house. It's livable, so we give him the deposit, and all is well. We moved over the weekend and paid the rent on the 6th. The landlord told me that he would actually need access to the house today to do some plumbing work. And I say no worries, but I'll be at work, so I'll leave the key above the door. I typically get off at around 12:30 anyway, and I told him as such, and at around 10, he texted me again wanting me to confirm that I was absolutely not going to be there before 12:30 because of a safety hazard. I say yes, that I'll be there after 12:30, and, well, I actually ended up getting off pretty early. I was headed home at 11, and I figured I'd just pop my head in and tell the landlord I was here, but I would stay outside. Now, remember when I said that the layout of the house was weird? It's because the front door leads directly into a bedroom. This is my bedroom. There's another door to the left, and that's the living room, which leads into the kitchen and back room or bathroom. So I turn the doorknob and it's unlocked. When I walked in, all I see is my landlord just hightailing out of my room, through the living room, kitchen, back room, and out the back door. I then see his car race out of my driveway, and weirded out, I walk back into my bedroom. only to find my underwear drawer open and strewn about. And my nightstand was open too, and I don't know what to do at this point because I'm just kind of stuck here. It's hard to find housing with my credit, and even harder to find a place that is wheelchair accessible. So, a creepy landlord, as much as I'd like to say, let's not see each other again, I know I'm going to have to deal with you for 12 more months. And please, leave my underwear alone, you fucking creep. Update. So, it's been an eventful couple of days, and I can't disclose a lot of information because my lawyer has advised me not to. But I can tell you guys that, according to my lawyer, I absolutely will get all of my money back. I've moved all of our belongings into storage, and we're currently staying with family. Long story short, I took all of your advice and bought a night vision motion sensor camera. And this worked incredibly in my favor because I caught my landlord on camera coming to my house at 2 a.m. and trying to look into my window. With this evidence, my lawyer has pretty much assured me that things will go in my favor. I'm working on getting my father approved for disability, and several people in my area have actually offered me temporary and even permanent housing. I can't express to you guys enough how thankful I am for all of your help. Even the people commenting negative things helped light a fire under my ass to be proactive. So, I guess this issue is resolved, or at least getting close to it. So, this will be my last update. I appreciate all of you guys, and I hope you guys have a wonderful night. Thanks again. It was the fall of 2007, and I was 15 living in New York. I was a competitive athlete in high school, the type who got up before school for workouts and trained for long hours after too. With recruiting season a year away too, I was under tremendous pressure to perform in my sport as well as in the classroom. I was struggling to keep up in my calculus at the time, so my mum suggested that I get a tutor. She made an appointment with a teacher of a friend of hers who really knew his stuff apparently. I'd been going to him regularly, probably 3 times a week for a month before I finally met Alex. Alex had the tutoring session after mine, and we'd cross paths every week. It had never been more than a glance and a smile, as I was incredibly shy and terrified of boys. He was tall and blonde with piercing blue eyes, so naturally, I thought he was kind of cute. But one day, my tutor had to change his schedule and decided to book us together as we were learning the same topics in calculus and all. I was shocked and kind of delighted when Alex started chatting with me afterwards and asked for my phone number. I had never had a boy pay attention to me in that way, and I was flattered that someone that cute wanted my number. Eventually, Alex and we began dating. Alex went to Catholic school in another town, but because he lived in the same town as I did, we took the bus every morning from my school to his. This gave us most mornings together, and he was able to meet my friends and all. And I have to admit that I was a little taken aback when they didn't take to him like I did. They mentioned him seeming weird, and I got super defensive, but let it go in the end. I realized that I'd been spending less time with them than I normally did and assumed that they may have been jealous that I had a boyfriend or something. As time went on, things got more serious too, and we started experimenting sexually, and eventually I lost my virginity to him in the back of his Ford Escape. That's when things began to change too, and while Alex and I always talked regularly, he started getting over the top about staying in contact with me. He would make me stay on the phone with him all hours of the night, until eventually my mum started taking my phone before I went to sleep. This relationship also started taking a toll on my athletic career. I was too tired to spend my extra time training and started skipping my practices to see him, driving 30 minutes each way to his school, and eventually my friend sat me down and told me how unhealthy this relationship had become. I had isolated myself from them, and my entire free time was spent with him. At this point, I wanted so badly to end the relationship that I had fallen out of love with Alex. And college applications were approaching too, and I had been scouted by no less than 10 colleges, and my plan was to attend Brown, my dream school. Alex's obsession with our relationship had taken a huge toll on his grades, and Brown wasn't going to be an option for him too. I remember when I told him that was where I was planning on going, and he freaked out, saying that he would never get in there and begging me not to go. At the time, I was also recruited by the University of Illinois. Alex applied there, in hopes that I would ditch Brown and go to Illinois with him. And that was the final straw for me. I ended things for good with Alex at that point, assuming that would be it. Because Alex would take the bus from my school to his every morning, I still had to see him though, and I remember walking into school past him and his classmates who took the bus with him, and some of his guy friends yelled slut and whore at me. Apparently he had spread a rumor that I had cheated on him with a bunch of guys and then ended it with me. I ignored it for the most part, until I started getting Facebook messages from random people at his school. I spent months getting nasty messages from guys at his school, accusing me of having STDs and telling me that I was going to get gangbanged by his friends. Eventually, I had to delete my Facebook because it just wouldn't stop. And I think deleting my Facebook was what set off the stalker tendencies for Alex. He wasn't able to see my face online, so he started calling non-stop and sending me desperate AIM messages telling me that he loved me. And while this was all going on, I was the favourite to win the high school championship in my sport. I'd gone undefeated all season, and Alex ended up showing up while I was competing for the championship, and I saw him there. It shook me so badly that I ended up losing the title, and I was furious and heartbroken. I ended up picking up his call that came that night and screamed at him, telling him to never contact me again. And that was when the threats began. I got a call a few nights later from Alex after he texted me that he had something important to tell me. Stupidly, I answered, and he began telling me how he was going to kill me. He was going to show up at my house when my parents were at work with rope and a knife and make me suffer like I'd done to him. Obviously, I started to cry, and he eventually went on to say that he was going to get me before I went into school, because he knew exactly where I parked every morning, and my parents were never going to find me. At this point, I decided to record what was being said and had it taped on my phone. I hung up once I felt that he'd said enough, and the next morning, I went into school extra early, much earlier than I figured he'd be there, and I showed my advisor the recording, who then called my mum. I remember feeling a deep-rooted shame as my mum listened to the recording like I'd done something to bring this on myself. And my advisor was so alarmed by the recording that he advised me to go to the police. This day still feels really surreal to me because my mum and I sat in the police station all day, explaining the story of my relationship with Alex and how it got to this point. The police then drove to his high school and arrested him while he was in class. The topper on the day, though, was that when I went out to bring food back to the police station for my mum and I pulled up into the station at the same time as the car holding Alex did. I saw him in cuffs, and he ended up looking like he wanted to kill me. Post-arrest, I got a restraining order against Alex, and he was sent to a mental institution for a short while. He ended up breaking the RO on more than one occasion, and I contacted the police, but they didn't think it was a cause to do anything. I think it's important to note that Alex's family was wealthy too and had a name in the area, so it wouldn't have surprised me if that's why they brushed it under the rug or something. I ended up attending Brown too and had to inform them of the RO and let them know that Alex would not be allowed on campus. It's been over 10 years since this happened, and I still continue to receive friend requests and phone calls from him on occasion. I recently moved across the country from where this occurred, and I finally feel safe now that I'm far enough from where he lives, but anytime I get blocked calls or texts from a number that I don't know, a thought goes through my head that it's him. It's safe to say that this experience completely changed who I let into my life and who I choose to date. About 7 years ago, I was 17 and my parents went out of town for a weekend and left me at home. This was a pretty common occurrence because my parents trusted me. I would usually spend these weekends away staying with friends or family, as my parents' house is a bit creepy to be alone in, even during the day. We live in a small rural town where everyone knows each other, and generally it's pretty quiet and safe. So, Saturday I was supposed to stay with a friend, but her parents decided at the last minute not to let me stay. It wasn't a big deal that I had to leave anyway. I mean, I was somewhat prepared to go home because her parents got weird about company sometimes anyway. I left her house, which is about 15 minutes from my parents' house, at around 9:30 or 9:45. While I was on the way home, I got a weird feeling that I just can't really explain. I just knew that I didn't want to go and stay at my parents' alone, and I called my brother and asked if I could go stay with him. At the time, he was living with a woman who had a small child, and he told me that it would be quieter and easier for him to just come and stay with me, since his dog would bark if I tried to come in the house anyway. So, he said that he would be at our parents' in 20 minutes. A side note that's relevant later, my brother's a relatively scary-looking guy. He's about 6'3", 200 pounds, pretty muscular and covered in tattoos. So after hanging up, I decided to stop at a gas station and grab a snack before going home so that my brother would be there when I got there. There was only a few cars in the lot, which is pretty typical because it is a small town in the rural south where everything pretty much stops after 8 p.m. I parked and walked up to the door, and there was a man standing outside the door smoking. He opened the door for me without saying anything. This is pretty normal southern hospitality, especially since I'm female, so I smiled and thanked him. Inside, there was another man standing by the door, and I noticed him staring at me as soon as I came in. He gave me that gross up and down look and said something to the effect of, "Hey sexy, what are you doing alone?" It was creepy as fuck, and I just ignored him and walked towards the back of the store, and he yelled after me and called me a bitch, and I still ignored him. I figured he was drunk or high or just an arsehole. Most people around here talk a big game, but rarely back it up anyway. So I wasn't scared, just annoyed, and I got my snacks and paid at the counter. But when I walked back up to the door, both the men were gone, and I was happy not to have to deal with any more catcalling. I began walking across the lot towards my car, which was probably about 100 feet away from the door. As I was walking, I looked down at my phone to see if enough time had passed for my brother to be at my parents'. And when I looked up, the asshole who had hit on me was standing at the pumps just staring. I looked at him for a second and continued walking. He said, "Hey, you know you're supposed to answer a man when he speaks to you, right?" I remember saying something snarky back to him and getting back in my car. He looked pissed at my sarcasm too, and I locked my doors as soon as I was in my car and started it, and was thinking of nothing but getting home to eat my snacks and hang out with my brother at this point. I put my car in gear and realized the man had disappeared. I looked around before pulling out of my parking spot, only to realize that both men were sitting in a car facing mine across the lot. They were both staring at me and talking, occasionally even pointing toward me. I just stared at them, defiant and pissed, because I didn't want them to think that they scared me at all. While we were sitting there having our staring contest, the man who had opened the door for me smiled and then gave me the finger across the throat gesture, as in, "You're dead." I rolled my eyes at this point and pulled out of the gas station annoyed, because honestly, I didn't think that they were going to do anything. But to my dismay, they pulled out behind me. I must admit that I hadn't been scared up until this point, because, as I said, most people here are a lot of talk with no follow-through. But instead of going home, I took a few back roads that connect back into a sort of circle to see if they were going to really follow me, which, of course, they did. But when they realized that I was testing them, they drove up really close to me and started laying on the horn. I couldn't see their headlights because they were that close, and I called my brother and told him what was going on, and he told me to come home and he would handle it. I started driving home, and the two assholes were still on my ass blowing the horn. Even with my detours, I was only about 3 or 4 minutes from my parents' house. I slowed down to pull into the driveway and was immediately relieved. At the end of the driveway, my brother was standing shirtless, with his shoulders back, hands crossed in front of his stomach, clearly holding a pistol, and his intimidating-looking pit bull sitting by his side. I drove around him into the yard, and the two guys, they actually started to pull in behind me until they saw my brother, and then they just hightailed it out of there. I have no idea what they would have done if I had stopped somewhere alone or just kept driving, or if my brother wasn't home at the time. I always think fondly of that image of him just standing there like a badass, ready to protect me. And, man, am I thankful that he was there for me. I was 21 and recently became a police officer, and was also recently dumped too. So, my friend suggested Tinder, and as a 21-year-old and new cop, I had the I'm invincible and I can take anyone on mentality. I matched with a very good-looking, out-of-my-league female, and we chatted and eventually set up a date to meet. She said that she had a great open field to look at stars and hang out at, so we could meet up at her house. So, the night came and I was excited, and she became excited when I picked her up. She guided me to the field, and it did look nice. Open space, woods, deer, and other wildlife. In the field, I noticed a really dim headlight in the distance too. And then the van started driving towards us and pulled up in front of us, almost close enough to block me from going forward. I told her to stay in the car and I'll go and see what's up and say hi. I grabbed my flashlight that I had in the car and walked up. In the front driver's seat of the van, there was a decently sized man. I asked him what was going on and if he could back up his car a little bit. He was very polite and said that he was the owner of the property and said that he didn't mean to scare us. He told me that he was having trouble with poachers on his property and just wanted to make sure that we weren't going to be shooting at anything. I assured him that we only came to look at some stars and wildlife, and he was perfectly okay with that. Told me to have a nice date and drove away. After that, the girl was texting non-stop, and around an hour later, I saw headlights coming toward us again, this time at a really fast pace. We hopped in the car and I moved to a more defensive position, and the same man came close enough to almost hit my car. She hopped out of the car at that point and ran towards the guy, and at this point, I knew that I was immediately fucked. I got out and gave them commands to back up and get on the ground. Obviously, neither of them complied. He then proceeded to charge me and knock me to the ground. Luckily, I was able to get him on his back and get up, and I saw my date grab a metal pipe from the van. She told me that they had a gun and to give them money in the truck and I won't get hurt. And, of course, with my I'm invincible mentality, I said hell no. She started to cry and said that they didn't want to hurt me, and he then started to go back towards the car. At that point, I told them that I was a cop, drew my concealed firearm and lay on the ground. After a moment of shock from all of us, they complied. I was able to call 911, tell them my name and badge number, and I had two at gunpoint and needed backup immediately. I gave our dispatcher the best directions I could to this field while on the phone, and then they just both fled. Again, stupid new cop, young guy mentality. I chased them. I took off after the man who ran into the woods around the field. I chased him for maybe 30 seconds and heard 3 loud pops and saw muzzle flash. My I'm invincible mentality went right out the window at that point. I just ran like hell back towards my car and peeled the hell out of there. I went back to the area I picked her up in, called dispatch again, and had officers come to that location. Of course, the first officers to pull up was my sergeant and my field training officer. And of course, they were both completely understanding and didn't give me any shit about it all, right? The most used words were dumbass and stupid fucking rookie. I hopped into their car and went towards the field. Luckily, the van was actually still there, and I was told to shut my mouth and only come out if they started getting shot at. They cleared the area and started looking in the van, and they found meth right on the center console and searched the rest of the car. And what scared me the most was when my field training officer and sergeant came back to the patrol car, let me out, and told me to come and look in the back of the van. But both of them were actually pale and quite horrified at this point. I went to the back of the van, and there were several knives, duct tape, lighter fluid, a decent amount of rifle ammunition, handcuffs, and what looked to be dried blood. In the front seat passenger side, we found an AR-15 style rifle and 2 more handguns. We obviously called for immediate backup and detectives at this point. And when they investigated the blood, it turned out it wasn't blood. But the plates were definitely stolen and the van was reported as stolen too. I still get shit about the whole encounter to this day, but luckily no one got hurt. But I will never use online dating again. And I mean ever.